So we're going to be talking about tests and then rubrics. We have here Natasha, who's French. So, and then Jeff Ford, you are in the CIS department, is that correct? Oh, he's in my yeah. Most people. Okay, Jeff, are you in the CIS department? You teach that? Oh, okay. I don't know why I had that you were in CIS. That's weird. Oh, I see. Okay. Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about rubrics and tests here, and they can be used together, and rubrics can be used separately. But most of what we're going to do, I'm going to share the screen with you and sort of show you the actual work in Blackboard. So when that happens, I won't have the chat window available to me, and so we'll be monitoring our chat questions. So feel free to type or jump in and ask a question whenever you have one. Okay, welcome to Jeff. Have some virtual cookies. We have real cookies here. So if you ever want to come over, we have real cookies. Oh, sorry about that. I'll move the speaker a little closer. Is that any better? Okay, good. If it gets bad, just let us know, and we can always switch to a headset. Okay. We're going to cover importing and exporting on both tests and rubrics, because you can take those out of one section and put them into another. Then also creating and editing tests and rubrics. Then deploying tests and test settings, and then applying rubrics to assessment items. Okay, so well, that was all. That's all that's in the slide. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now, and we're going to take a look at. We'll start with the tests, and then we'll move to rubrics. Okay, so we're in a sandbox course of mine. So first we're going to look at importing and exporting tests. So if we go to Course Tools, Test Tools and Surveys, Tests, and we'll see all the list of tests that are in your course. In this particular sandbox course, I just have a handful of different tests. Now, if I were teaching 2 sections of a single course, and I built a test once, I wouldn't want to rebuild an entire test twice. So I can export the test, and it's super duper fast. It's not really fast. It seems to be running a little slower than usual today, but you can see it is processing. Yes, these are tests that are already created. So if you already have a test, this is how you can get it out. Or if you know another instructor who has a test, this is how you can tell them to export it and then send you the file and you can input it. Course tools, test surveys and pools, and then tests. And I'm not really sure why it's taking quite this long. I'm going to try to reload this, and we'll see if we can get it to come up a little faster. Okay. First tool. And export. Let's see if it goes any faster. We could have just set ourselves back for that entire time that we were waiting. It usually does take a little bit of time, but this seems extraordinarily slow. Okay, to save time, we're going to pretend that we already did this. will happen, you'll get a pop-up box and it'll ask you where you want to save your file. If you don't see that box, your browser settings are set to where it automatically goes into your downloads folder. And so that's just a My Computer window, downloads, and it'll be in there. For our purposes, we're going to say that we saved it and we remember the location, and now we've gone into the other section and we go back to Course Tools, Test Tools and Surveys, Tests, and then we would click Import Test. And here it's going to give me a fit because it's still processing that last one. Import Test, and you'll click the Browse My Computer button to find the file on your computer. It will be the file that you had just saved, and it will be a zip file. So you would save the zip file, or you would locate the zip file and click Submit, and then you would have the test show up in your list. So, and it would show up as a new test. You're uploading the file that you had exported, yeah. And it will be a zip file, so you won't open that file to find a file inside. Exported it from one section to another section. Yeah, exactly. And it would be easier if we can. I think we may have some sort of lag on servers today because that's not the first slowness encounter I've had. But it's fairly simple. Just export, save the file, then import, upload the file. So once you've got a test in Blackboard, you can edit it if you want to make some modifications to it, add questions, remove questions. You can also build a new test. Yes, and the building a new test is similar to editing a test, except for you're starting the name, so you have to give it a name. You can add description of the test covers, units, whatever, instructions, we'll have 50 multiple choice, whatever instructions you want to provide to students there. You don't have to. You don't have to have a description, and you don't have to have instructions, like, they're kind of helpful. When you've finished filling in those areas, you click Submit, and you can see this has 0 questions. If we had chosen a previous test and chosen to edit, it would give us the description and instructions if there were any, the number of questions and the total number of points, and then you would see all of the questions listed here. Starting from scratch, we can create a question, and we have several different types of questions we can create, and then we also have a reuse question, so we can use questions from other tests. So if you had chapter tests and then you were doing a larger unit test, you could find questions from those smaller quizzes and use them instead of recreating them. So to create a question, if we choose multiple choice, which is fairly common, you don't have to put a question title, but you do have to put the question text. Yeah. And all required fields are marked with that star. You have a couple of options when it comes to the display of the choices. You can have them numbered, the answer choices, A, B, C, or D, or numerical, or Roman numerals, or none. You can have, default is vertical, but you can also have horizontal choices. It's just a matter of personal preference. You can allow partial credit, which gets a little tricky with multiple choice. If you have like an A and B, B and C, that's one that you want to do. Exactly. So that would be. And then show the answers in random order would mean that it wouldn't show in the order that you're putting them in now. Yeah. But you can also randomize the questions themselves in the test settings, which we'll cover in a minute. You choose the number of answer choices you want, up to 100. I don't recommend having 100 choices on a multiple choice. I'm not really sure why they have that many choices, but I'm sure it's come up at some point. If we put in our answer possibilities,
Now you can use size.
yeah, you could put, yeah, you can put as much text as you want in here. And then by default, the first answer is indicated as correct, and to change that, you just click on the radio button next to the correct choice. You can include feedback on each question. So you can have the correct answer feedback if you want to say, great job. The incorrect feedback might even be more important or more helpful, because that's your opportunity to direct students to where they can find more information. Review this in chapter, whatever. So you have that opportunity. It's at the end of the test. Yeah. You can create categories for each of your questions. If you want to do like for friendship, it would be pronunciation, spelling, culture, and topics, levels of difficulty, and keywords. That's a lot of work on your part, but if you plan to use this test for like ever, it might be worth it. You can also put notes in here for yourself, instructor notes, like, everybody has to have this question right, or I have to go over something in class. So you do have options to put notes for yourself as well as feedback to students. And once you have all of your options set and your feedback in place, click submit. And there's our question. By default, it throws 10 points in there. You can change that by clicking on the points and editing it here.
So, for example, this number 1 was 2 points.
It was by default 10, yes, but then I changed it to 2. You can also select extra credit, and then how many points you want it to be for extra credit. Once you have multiple questions in, you can select each individual question and update the points. So if you said, oh, I want these 5 questions to be worth more points, you can do that in bulk, so you don't have to individually edit each question's point value. You can also select all and change the point value, or select none and change the point value. If you ever notice, and typically most tests have most questions with the same point value. Most are like 2 points and then a few with 10 points. If you notice that your point total up here doesn't add up the way it should, we've had that happen on rare occasions with course copies. If that's the case, just select all of them and update the points even if they're already set to the correct point value. Just clicking that update just resets it. So that happens occasionally, but not really, really often. So you can also select all the question types. So if we had all of our questions set to 2 points, and then we said, oh, but I want to select all the essay questions and bulk edit them to be worth 5 points, you could do that also. You can copy and paste. Yes. You can copy and paste into the text editor. If you're using the Firefox browser, which is the one that we recommend, you have to copy and paste from Word, not from another area on Blackboard or the web. It has to be from Word into, yeah. They do have symbols, and so there are some French symbols in there, but it's limited, and you have to, yeah, you kind of have to individually put those in there. But yes. Okay. So that's creating and editing a test is sort of the same process. Now, once you have a test, it's here in your test area, but it's not necessarily in an area where students can get to it. And this will indicate where in the course it is. All of these deployed tests are in a folder called test items, not a content area. it's in a folder. So sometimes you still have to kind of look for it. But the ones that say no, those aren't deployed, so students have no way to access those.
It's out there and they can see it.
It's out there, but it may be invisible. So to deploy a test, you'll want to go to the content area where you want to put it, and I keep mine in the test items folder. And I have several tests here. This is available to students. I just went to the content area. And that's just a folder I call it. In your course, you might call it your lessons folder, and then put it in lessons, or if you have an exams area where you put your tests. So you can put them in any content area you like. But once you get to the content area to deploy the test, you'll select under assessment, test, and you'll see these are all the tests that aren't deployed for students. So these are the tests that students don't have access to. They're not in the course yet. And so if we selected, we would select the test that we wanted from the list and click submit. And that brings us to our test options screen. So you can have the test open in a new window, which is not necessary, but I don't like it because I have two windows open, but I'm just kind of, you know, OCD about keeping things organized and minimalized. So you do have that option, and we do recommend that for hyperlinks, but not necessarily for tests now. The test link available, that's what will determine whether students can access it. So if that's set to no, students will not be able to get to it. If it's set to yes, students will be able to get to it unless or until you set these. So if you don't have these checked, and this is set to yes, students will have access to it. This is the master on-off switch. You want them to have access to it, yes, but only during a certain time frame. You'll need to check the display until and display after, and set those to whatever dates you want it to be available. You can allow students, you can add an automatic announcement, but that's just going to kind of put a generic one in. It's probably actually better if you make your own announcement. You can allow multiple attempts. You can allow unlimited or a specific number. So if you want students to have 3 chances at it, you can do that.
Will you get 1%?
Yes, you will see each of their attempts and be able to see where they placed. Also, in the grading, there's an option to take an average of their attempts, their highest attempts, their lowest attempts,
Or you could just do it one time.
Yes.
Shot and we're done.
Yes. You can, if you have that unchecked, they'll only have 1 chance. Force completion is an option that a lot of instructors like to use because that means students can't get into the test and then go out of the test and do something else and come back to it. However, if they lose connection to their internet or they get knocked out of the test for some reason, they're not going to be able to get back in it. So you'll have to reset it, and they'll lose all their work. It's kind of a catch-22. It's better to leave it off, especially if it's proctored. Because if it's a proctored exam, they're not going to get out and go cheat and then come back, right? Because it's proctored. And but they will get knocked out, especially in testing because it's so busy. They get knocked out, then we have to reset it, and they lose their work, and it's time-consuming for students who are already waiting in line and testing. So if it's a proctored exam, please do not use forced completion. Otherwise, it's up to you as the instructor, but you will have to reset it if they get knocked out. And then you have to kind of make that judgment call. Did they sincerely get knocked out, or are they trying to pull the wool over my eyes? Yeah. So, and if you make your test like, cheater-proof, then that's even better. But in friends, that's going to be a little tougher. Yeah. A timer is an issue that we have a lot of questions about often, and it's an area where we have a lot of misconceptions. The timer by itself does not mean that when the time runs out, the test goes. Students can still complete the test. It will flag it in Grade Center that they went over the test, and you'll see their start time and their complete time. The auto submit will automatically submit the test 5 to 7 minutes, and that has to do with server's refresh rate and the time they entered comparatively. So 5 to 7 minutes after that timer is up, it will automatically submit when auto submit is turned on. Yeah. The timer gives students a warning, and the thing that is important to mention, especially to students about that warning, is to read it, because the box will pop up and say, your time is expired, do you want to continue, or click OK to submit, click cancel to continue. And students, they think it's just a warning, oh, your time is up, and they'll click OK, thinking that they'll continue, and it submits, and they say, it submitted for me. Hold it too. So if you have the timer set and or auto submit on, just make it clear to students. They're going to get confused. They're going to do it anyway, but we do what we can. So
Jackie, I don't know if you saw Jeff's question. I just jumped into the room, so.
Oh, no, I didn't.
He's just asking, so with forced completion, student has to do all at once. With force off, student can do part, stop, come back later, and do more, stop, come back later.
Correct. They can't stop and come back to it later. If they log out of the test, they cannot get back in. So that's why I was saying, if they lose internet connection during the middle of the test, they can't just reconnect and then get back in if forced completion is selected. So if you have forced completion selected, you just want to know that if a student does get, like, legitimately have a technical issue and get knocked out, they'll have to go through you. They'll probably contact us, and we'll say we have to contact the instructor, and then they'll have to restart the test. Restart the test?
Yeah.
Oh, to restart a test in, if we have multiple attempts, they'll be able to get to their next attempt. But if you only have one attempt, then we have to go in and clear it. And you as the instructor have that option also. In Grade Center, you'll see their attempt and click on it, and then it has a clear attempt. Or, and yeah, that's how you reset the test. And I can show you guys that. Yeah.
And Jeff followed up with that. Does the timer keep track of the time used?
The timer keeps track of the time used. If the student gets knocked out of a test, yes, the timer does keep running. And how it appears to you as the instructor in Grade Center, you see the time that they started and the time that they submitted. And a lot of times you'll see, even on a test with a timer, if a student got knocked out and they were taken in the evening, and then you go back in to check it the next morning, it'll show that they were in the test for like 24 hours. And that's usually a pretty good indication that something went wrong and they got knocked out. Also, if you see the start time is identical to the submission time, and they've answered just a few questions, that's always they lost connection to the test, they had a technical issue. I mean, I guess, yes, because even if they had closed it themselves, it would put the time that they closed it. So if those times are identical, that's one of the key things that we look for a technical issue. And then, of course, a password, fairly self-explanatory there. You use yes, and that's used for proctored exams. You have to check the box and put the password in. Then you give that with the testing information to the testing center, and then the testing center puts in the password. So the due date for the test will make it appear in the calendar in Blackboard. And yes, so when they have to complete it. The display dates are the time, is the window that they have that they'll be able to access the test. And then the due date is the due date. Sort of. I mean, you could have the display date go past the due date, yeah, and then just say, well, I'll let you take it, but you'll lose 50% or whatever. Never click this button right here. That means it will not go into Grade Center. If you don't want, and you won't be able to see the results. So you wouldn't even use that, wouldn't even work as a survey. So by default, that's not checked. Don't ever check it. Yeah. Because then this was just an exercise in futility. These are the feedback options, and by default, students will only see their score. You got 15 out of 20 right. That's all they'll see. If you have bothered to put the feedback on the questions or on the overall test, because there's both options, you're going to want to show the feedback, because otherwise you waste your time typing it. A lot of instructors don't want students to see what the correct answers were, but they can't
tell them that their students what they were.
Yeah. Also, but it is a good idea to let them see the answers that they submitted, so they know which ones they got wrong, and they can go look up the answers. So pedagogically, that is more sensible, because then they know what to work on.
Can you, after the test is over with the due date is not passed, can you say that it's only?
Yes, you can change those. You can change those later after everyone has submitted their test in the class. You can go back and set it to correct answer, and then they sort of have an answer key. That's a very good point, yeah. You can change those at any time. Presentation modes, this is what the student will see when they take the test. All at once is exactly what you would think. It has all the questions in a line, and they just scroll up and down. One at a time, they have one question, they have to click next. If it's a proctored test, we don't recommend one at a time, because every time the student has to click next and it has to reload, it's just putting that much more work on the servers. So one at a time does slightly increase the risk that a student will get knocked out of the test, especially during high volume testing. So that's midterms, finals, proctoring time. Prohibit backtracking is an option if you display one at a time. And prohibit backtracking means that a student can't go back to a previous answer. So they can't get to a later question which clues them in, or just have a thought and they, oh yeah, I know that, and go back. It's an option that some instructors like. Students will click it anyway, and then they will likely get knocked out of their test.
Jackie, Jeff kind of related to that. He says, I randomize questions and don't allow backtracking, and students can only see one question at a time. Force does not affect any of these, and multiple times in and out are not an issue. He's, I guess, asking about the force completion, if that affects that, or if it is a bit affected by that.
No, they're two independent things. But like I said, the one at a time, especially during high volume, can increase the risk that a student will get knocked out of the test. And the backtracking, prohibit backtracking does, but it's the student's fault when it happens, because they, even though it says you can't backtrack, they will click it anyway, just to see if they can do it. And they will get, usually they'll get an error screen, and if they hit the back button on their browser, that'll usually fix it and set them back to right. So if they call us in a panic and they haven't touched anything, we tell them to do that first. And if that doesn't work and it's force completion, we say, we're going to have to contact your instructor. Why did you click that button? So just, we make it clear to students they're going to do it anyway. It's about a 50-50 mix between if students will come to us first or they go to instructors. So if they come to us and it's something that we usually go to the instructor for authorization unless it's something that we can just fix. But typically we go to the instructor for anything that would really require authorization. Randomizing questions is a great idea. It's an easy way to sort of mix things up. You can't have side-by-side cheating, that sort of thing. So if you have that option selected, that just obviously randomizes all the questions. Great, get 2 attempts, yeah. So that means, like, if they've got 3 attempts and they took it the first time and they wrote, you know, it's not going to be the same order the next time. Okay, so once you have all of your options set, you would click submit. Oh, I've checked the password box. I'm going to uncheck that. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. If you want, the question was, could you use a test as a homework assignment? And yeah, you can count it as homework. You can classify it as a no. If it's a question and you submit the answers individually in Blackboard, that's called a test. Yeah, exactly. So okay, so then the test will show up here, and that's the one we were working on, and students could take that test. So that's all of the creating a test, editing tests, deploying tests, and settings for tests. So that's everything pretty much for tests. Do we have any questions about tests? Other questions? I have one question. Resetting in Grade Center. Okay, we're going to see what it looks like to reset a student's test in Grade Center. So if a student calls you and they're panicked and they got knocked out of their test and they only answered 5 questions, when you go into Grade Center, Full Grade Center, and you'll see their test, and I got to find a random fake test that. Okay, so see, this is a demo student, and oh, that's their activity. Let me find that. I can find a test item here. Yeah, these would be the test and the assignments, and Grade Center has everything. So say this one, we may have to go in as a fake. Okay, so you would click on the attempt, and you can see the students' questions, their answers, none given, none given. They didn't answer those questions. They got knocked out of the test. They're all kinds of panicked. Click test information, and you can see that here's the time that they started and the time that they submitted their test. And there's that clear attempt. So that's all you have to do to get them back into it. They would lose all their work, but clearing the attempt lets them have that next opportunity to take the test. Oh, this is a Grade Center, so these are each row is an individual student, and each column is an individual test or assignment, yeah. So here's another attempt that we can see. And so on this one, we can have the questions and answers, and we can see their test information. We can clear the attempt. They have an attempt, the student has an attempt in progress. A lot of times we'll get students saying, I clicked submit and I got an error. And so they've had a technical issue on submission. They've completed the test. And what we do is we come in here and we look and we can say, we don't tell them anything about how well or poorly they did on their test, but we make sure, okay, yeah, they've answered all their questions, all the questions are saved, and we click submit. And you can do that as the instructor as well. And you can force the submission, and then they have both of those attempts in there. So, and then you can clear the attempts. You can also edit the test right here. So if you were looking at a student's attempt and you realize, oh my goodness, I wrote that question wrong, or it was true instead of false, you can edit the test. And when you edit the test and there's already attempts in place, so we change. So when we say, oh, that was supposed to be true, and we set that to true, submit and update attempts. That means it's going to regrade all those students who already got it counted against them, so that and it gives you the warning. Do you want to update those attempts? So then all the existing attempts have been from the students, from the grade center. But it applies to everybody, yeah. Because that button in the test, in the grade center, is accessing the test right there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, exactly. And you can edit the test from the course tools, test surveys and tools if you have that same realization. Just wherever you counter that and you edit the test itself, it's going to edit it for everybody and it's going to regrade for everybody.
Jackie, I just wanted to point out, Jeff had a good idea. If you're not looking at the chat, he basically said before he resets an exam, he'll copy or do a screen capture of all the students' answers. And we do that here in Blackboard support before we reset anything too, if there's any attempts at all at answering the questions. So it looks like Jeff does it for documentation, and I think that's a good idea too, just so you're covered too if there's ever a question.
Yeah, when we have, especially when we have proctored events and testing calls us and they say this student got knocked out of the test, what we do is we just, because there's no great print function or export function from Blackboard, we just literally highlight and copy and paste it to Word, and I'll demonstrate for you here. I never use this computer, so if we copy and paste it into Word, you can see it will give the student, it'll tell them what they got right or wrong, and it tells them, you know, what the correct answer is. So we painstakingly go through and delete the indicators and the correct answers and the points.
We lost the view, Jackie. I'm not sure what happened. There might be a lag too, but at least I lost the view.
Okay. I think that's because I didn't share desktop. Let me try sharing. Share desktop. Sorry about that.
That's better.
Okay, so now you should be able to see. So what I'm saying, we go through and we will delete all indications of correct and incorrect, and then we send it to the students. So, and we'll do some formatting so that they have the question and they have the answer that they gave, and that's it. And if they've gotten a long way through the test, then that can take some time. And again, it's not super great for students because they're already waiting and proctoring, but it does help them so that when we do get them back into the test, they can go through, and if they trusted their answers, they can just
Jackie, sorry, you said we send them to the student. We usually provide this to the proctor. We don't give them to the, we don't give them to the student, just so they can read back those answers that they had given if they want to recover. But if the exam has been randomized, if you have to reset and go back into it, you know, after it's been cleared, that could be an issue.
Yeah, if it's random questions, it's going to be of limited value to students. So, yeah, it does stress students out quite a bit, but we do what we can within reason. So, but yeah, that's always a bummer when they lose connection, and it happens a lot during the heavy proctoring times, midterms, and final. So if you can put your proctored event during a different time, that would be good because less traffic for students. So okay, so that's tests. Let's look at rubrics. Rubrics you can access through your course tools. Rubrics. They're on your control panel. And I have several in this course. Exporting and importing rubrics is exactly the same as tests. You just, next to the title, choose, oh no, I'm sorry, it isn't. You select the rubrics you want to export, and then click the export button. I don't know what's different. Yeah, and this has a different screen because this one also gives you can export it to your computer or your content collection, which is going to put it right back in your course. So you want to export it to your computer and then click Submit and download and then save it. And I'm going to save it on the desktop here. So we have the zip file, and that's how the test export will be similar. There's fewer steps. But now that we have the file saved, we would go into our other course, and again under Course Tools and Rubrics, click the Import Rubric, Browse Computer, and we would find our rubric file, and open and submit. So from one section to another. Yeah, and then this gives you sort of some details to let you know, like if everything went in or if there were any errors. So now I have 2 of those. So editing rubrics, and I'm probably going to edit one of these swankier ones because my test one's just junky. So if we edit or we create a new rubric, it's a similar process. So we're going to look at the edit a rubric because this one is, like I say,
Jackie, sorry, Jeff was asking where the rubric originally came from, and Jeff, to answer your question, you can actually, I'm going to post a link to a site, and hopefully you can grab this link. There are actually some rubrics available from Blackboard that were created by other people at other institutions, which they are sharing. You can actually download all of those rubrics. They're for different things: discussion boards, assignments, event proposals, writing assignments, blog assignments. You can actually download those, and the way Jackie just showed you, and import them into Blackboard, at which point you can edit them for your purpose. So good way to go there and get it, edit what you need and put it in your course, attach it to assignments. So we'll make that link available probably in the follow-up whenever we send out the PD certificates.
Yeah, and this is actually one of those rubrics, and you can see the history of it here. We downloaded it from Blackboard to use as an example, and this is a really complete rubric. So when you're creating a rubric or editing one of those from Blackboard or from another instructor or one that you've made previously, you can add different criteria. This one has promptness and initiative, mechanics of writing, because this is a discussion type rubric, relevance of post. Then levels of achievement, you can add additional. 3 is fairly typical, not quite there, doing all right, and that's what we're looking for, kind of levels. And you can edit each one of those levels of achievement and each of the criteria. So you can honestly tailor it to the sort of the feel and the tone of your course. You can put it in French if you wanted to. You can set the rubric type by points or by percentage or by a range. Now the range is a little trickier, especially then when it comes to grading, because you put it in a range and then you pick a range. I'm not a fan of ranges, but I'm sure that some instructors use them very effectively. It just depends on how you've used rubrics in the past and what you're comfortable with. And you can set the points 0, here it's just 0, 1, and 2. You could do, 5, 10, 50, whatever point values you want to set within each category. And they don't have to be the same. If in this category you wanted it to be 1, 2, and 5, you can do that. They don't have to be identical. And then the total points will show up here, and that's what that item, whichever items you associate with it, will be worth. So after you've got everything set there, you would click Submit. And this is a list of all your rubrics, but this doesn't necessarily apply them to any of your items. So in order to do that, you would go to an item. If it was a discussion, you would go into your discussion select the forum. Well, let's create a forum. If we create a forum and we give it a name, forum. I'm feeling for my exquisite typing. When you set all your restrictions or your restrictions there, you have your grade points possible. Then you want to add a rubric, associated rubric. You can create a new rubric if you have something that specifically comes to mind there. You can create from an existing, which will open up a copy of it that you then edit, or the easiest way would be to select a rubric, and then you have all of your options, and you can say, I want to use my discussion rubric and submit, and it's letting you know that you're assigning the points based on the rubric, so you click OK. This is an important thing to make note of right here. By default, students don't see the rubric, which makes it really less valuable in general to teaching if students don't see it. So you want students to see the rubric, and you have the option of with or without scores. And again, I don't really understand what the value would be without the scores. So yes, the scores is what we're recommending and used for grading. Yes, you would, or if they're submitting, it's great for most any assignment, but especially for written work, discussion boards or papers, or it could even be used in French if you did them recording their voice. It could be, you know, the speed, the rhythm, the pronunciation, yeah, it provides a lot of, the rubrics themselves have a lot of specific feedback on them, so that's helpful. And they have an area where you can type in individual feedback still, so you're not just giving the same exact canned answer every time. And we'll look at what the rubrics look like when you're grading in just a second. So we're going to click submit on that. And then if we're looking in Grade Center, and I'm going to scooch over to a different course real quick because there's a course that I know that I've used rubrics in. Very simple rubrics, but in Grade Center, full Grade Center, then in this course I used a rubric on both the submitting an assignment and on the practice discussion, but we'll look at this one. And so what we have, when you go to the inline grader for a submitted file assignment, so if they were submitting a paper, and you could do the grading here, but then also click on the rubric button, and that's how you would access the rubric. So you can see here, this one's very simple, whether they had a file and whether the content was appropriate. So the benefit for me, because it was a very simple assignment, it was basically, you know, can you submit a file? So it was easy just to click, you know, nope or yes. So if you click, you can click at any level and it just automatically selects it. Then I could click and add additional feedback if I wanted to, and I could add feedback overall. So you have a lot of versatility with the rubrics. You don't have to type everything out every time, especially if it covers sort of the same thing you find yourself saying over and over and over again on an assignment. That's a good use for a rubric. And then if you want to say something more specific on a specific point or on the rubric overall, you can add that there and then just click save. And then it adds the points for you. You do have yet another area to add feedback for students. Especially for French, you might need to, instead of just typing out, you might want to provide feedback that includes the audio or a video. the full editor is this weird little italicized A in the corner, and that will give you the full editor, which has the webcam, so you can provide video feedback too. So just exactly. Audio feedback and video feedback are really, really helpful, especially when you don't want to come across as very harsh, or you want to really get them to understand the nuances of your feedback. So, but accessing the rubrics, again, really easy from the inline grader. And then if we go to, I go back to my full grade center, and we'll check on a discussion. Okay, so if I find a discussion that has a rubric on it, and I'm going to grade the user's activity, and I didn't use the rubric on this one. I'm going to use it next semester. That's what it is. The rubric would be in this area, so I apologize for that. I thought I had applied one to that, but it would be similar, and you would just click on the rubric, and it pulls it up, and again, you can grade directly from the rubric, and on the same screen where you also have the ability to reply to discussions. So it's really helpful with discussions, and really convenient for paper assignments. So yeah. So okay, so yeah. So that's using the, now we know how to create a rubric, how to export and import rubrics, how to edit rubrics, how to grade with rubrics, and making rubrics available to students. I'm going to show you really quickly the student view tool, which if you haven't used, it is fantastic, and you should use it almost every day. Under your course tool, student view. If it's not there, go to Customize, Tool Availability, find, they're alphabetically listed, Student View, check the box, click Submit, and then it will be right here. When you use the Student View tool, you'll notice that your name is gone and your picture is gone and it's replaced by this demo. You're logged in, you're seeing the course exactly as a student sees it, with the one exception that have the teacher view to go back, which students don't have. The benefit of this is you can see the way students see, because they don't access Grade Center. And the grades area is a big mystery to most instructors. How do students see it? Where do they see the rubric? So if we go into student view and I go to grades, this is that submitting a file assignment, and there's the rubric. So I say, how do my students see the rubric? The rubric is right there. They can see my comments if there are any, and they can see their score and where and why they scored that way. No, I don't think Pinnacle has rubric. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think that Pinnacle does. Yeah, that's right. Right, you can't. Pinnacle is just grades and attendance, and it's great for grades and attendance, but for interacting with students and their work, it doesn't have that capability. So that's how students will view rubrics. Do we have any questions online about rubrics? Or Sense or Blackboard in general? Do you have any other questions, or are you
No,
going to use rubrics?
No questions online, Jackie.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, we do have one-on-one appointments available. If you start using something and you get kind of tangled up, come on over. We've got a lab, we've got dual monitors, we've got cookies quite often, so we will just let us know, and we'll set aside a block of time to meet with you, go over everything with you. We have we'll have workshops on some of the topics that we've done if you want to sign up for one of those, and go go and be awesome. Go make an awesome rubric, or make an awesome test, and let us know about it. Because if you're awesome, I will give you a prize. If you can be like, look at what I did and it's awesome, I will literally give you a prize. I'm not saying it's a super swanky prize, but it is a prize.
We'll send out a link to the recording from today along with your PD certificate for attending. We appreciate you guys being here. And just